to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. I'm your host, Jeannie Hall, and I'm pursuing my dream of writing in my jammies for a living by discussing some of the spiritual teachings that have put me on the road to success. I hope to inspire you to feel better, live happier, and pursue your own dreams. Join me. Welcome to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. This is episode 6, The Role of Surrender. Today I want to talk about the role of surrender in our spiritual journeys. Basically, I've started this journey in trying to seek more enlightenment, more happiness in my life, and I'm sure if you are trying to turn over a spiritual leaf yourself, that you are also trying to find more happiness and fulfillment in your life too. And one of the things that I've discovered is that much of our lives, we tend to struggle and strain and strive in everything we do. We're taught this. We're taught that if you want a raise or a promotion, you need to work harder. You need to be there for longer hours. You need to volunteer to do everything, even if that means you never get a day off. Whenever I was writing, I was taught over and over and over again by different writing teachers and different authors that you better sit in that chair and stay on that computer or that laptop till your butt aches, even if inspiration isn't coming, even if you can't think of anything to write, or even if everything that you're typing out you hate. I was taught that, if you wanted straight A's, you need to study hard. You need to study all the time, even if it means missing sleep. And in my college freshman year, 2 weeks before my final, I actually ended up with mononucleosis and the flu at the same time and totally killed my grade average because I couldn't go to school for 2 weeks. And in college, they don't tend to give you makeup exams and things like they do when you're in high school. So it took me 4 years to bring it back up to honors level. So I've been there. I've totally been there. And I always believed that that's what life was, is that you had to strain and strive. Life was hard, and that's just the way it was, and you had to deal with it. And, even if you're miserable, even if you're exhausted, I believed that for so much of my life. And then whenever I came across the law of attraction, it just was such a revelation to me. I realized it just made so much sense. And I think I've talked about the zing of truth. When you hear an absolute truth, that it hits you and you'll feel a zing of it go up your spine, or it'll give you goosebumps, or it'll make you tear up, or what you'll have a reaction to it because it's the truth. And you know deep down, without being able to explain why, that it is the truth. Well, that's what happens to me too. And I decided I wanted more out of my life than just struggling and straining and hating something. And I think a lot of us do. And I think a lot of us are in that place where there's one or two or maybe several areas of our life that we want to improve. We don't want to be miserable in that area of our life anymore. And I think most of us have great areas of our life too that we're super happy with and thankful for, hopefully. I think the more you have gratitude and the more you're thankful, the more likely it is that more things are going to come into your life. But a lot of us are struggling with certain aspects that are really important. Either you feel like there's something missing on a relationship level, like a person, a friend, a lover, whatever it is that you're after, a happily ever after maybe. Or maybe you don't have any money and you've never had any money and you're always struggling and it's always a strain and strive. And maybe you're like me, where that strain and strive and struggle with money has led you to be in a position with a job or whatever that you really are not happy with. You're really miserable in, and yet you feel like you can't get out of that. So I've been there. I am there on certain things. I totally understand that. And one thing law of attraction has taught me is that not only do you need to focus on what you do want and the positive aspects of things and what you're grateful for, but part of that is the overall vibration that you send out is only being mirrored back to you. It doesn't carry the manifestations that we want. It doesn't carry those happily ever afters that we want unless we send out the feeling that we want back. We have to have the feeling first. And one of my mentors, Kelly Cooper, often says the old adage that seeing is believing, that we've heard our whole lives over and over and over again in many different ways, in movies and TVs and TV shows and all sorts of stuff. That's not really the truth. It's actually the opposite of that. If you have something you're unhappy with in your life and you want to see a change, it needs to be the opposite. It needs to be believing first. Believing is seeing. If you believe it, you will see it. And that's the truth. But it's hard for us to accept if you've never lived that way before. And I'm someone who is adjusting to that. So I can totally understand anyone who's struggling to get something that they want and aren't seeing results and are getting frustrated, because I'm with you. I'm right there with you. But I have seen some examples that prove that good things can happen. Miracles can happen even. And I'd like to give a couple of examples. One is from this amazing spiritual teacher. She's a speaker, an author, a singer-songwriter as well. Her name's Rika Zimmerman. I've mentioned her in my podcast before. And if you've ever watched her Facebook live videos or her YouTube channel, you already know she's a living miracle. She's shared it on all of her social media and different things, her website. If you haven't checked her out, please do. But back in 2015, Rika was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And it was throughout her body. It was tumors, and it was growing in her brain, in her spine, in her liver, and several other vital areas. And most people who would receive that kind of news would start putting their affairs together. They would, pretty much feel like, I don't have much of a chance to live here. But she, being who she was, she didn't believe she'd been given a death sentence. She believed that she could beat this, and that she could heal herself. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, this is one of those, she healed herself magically, ha 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 stories. I don't believe that. And I know there's stuff like that out there. But here's the thing. This isn't one of those. This is something completely different. Because she did believe she could heal herself. But when she tried initially, and this is someone who'd been going down this spiritual path for several years and was a teacher herself, and someone that I would compare to myself and think, wow, she's way more enlightened than I am. But when she got that diagnosis, she decided that she was going to try and heal herself. And what happened was the tumors only grew larger. And this sounds like, it's like, oh, see, that's proof that this stuff doesn't work. But that's not the end of the story. What happened was she starts trying to heal herself. So she spends hours in meditation, all day long, in fact, and all the different tools that she's learned, affirmations, visualization, all the stuff that you learn how to do when you learn about the law of attraction, when you learn about personal development. And all of those have their place, but in and of themselves, they can't heal you. It's about how you change the energy of yourself and what you're sending out into the universe. And so she was focused at the time on shrinking and erasing all her tumors, and that's all she was focused on. She was sure she could do it, and she was saying things like, come on, God, we can get rid of this. But about 2 weeks after her diagnosis, her condition had only worsened. And it was only then that she really started to doubt what she was doing, and she started to think that no matter what she did, she was going to die. And it was only at that point that she actually let herself grieve and feel the pain and the horror and just the absolute terror of this diagnosis that she had, this horrible disease that was all throughout her body, and she could easily lose her life and not be here on this planet anymore. And it was only after she gave in to those feelings, she let herself sob for 3 solid days. She barely moved out of her bed. It was only after she quit trying to force her way into health that something magical happened. She began to understand that she was forcing it. She began to understand that she was straining and striving and creating all this resistance to the healing by trying to heal herself, by talking to God and telling God, no, 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 we can do this, let's do this. So she had to quit fighting. She had to quit trying to control everything. She had to quit trying to control her circumstances and to release her need to do something. She had to give in. And she, for the first time, she really realized that by fighting that she was actually making things worse. And it sounds kind of fatalistic, but it was actually the key to unlocking her real power. And notice I didn't say that she gave up, she gave in. She gave in to those really scary feelings that most of us never want to feel, and we don't want to sob for 3 days. But she let herself do that. And when she stopped trying to force everything and be super spiritual leader extraordinaire, she gave into her human emotions and let herself just be with them and experience them for what they were. And that was kind of relaxing her, what she had been doing. So she relaxed and she allowed her, after she went through that first stage of grief, she allowed herself to be inspired and for more understanding to flow in. And what happened was she found just the right doctor at just the right time. She found a doctor that was only a handful who was able to do this brand new experimental treatment. And she ended up going through this treatment. And was it horrible? Of course. There's no cancer treatment right now that we have that's not horrible and painful and makes you sick and all those horrible things. That's true. It was. But her tumors began to shrink. And in 2 months, only 2 months, they were gone. So she went from having basically what most people would consider a death sentence to being completely healed in 2 months. And many medical professionals might conclude that that's not true, or that kind of patient wouldn't make it, but she totally did. And here she is 2 years later, completely healed and beautiful and teaching and inspired more than ever. And that all happened because she gave in. She went with the flow. She allowed herself to grieve and feel those feelings of extreme sorrow and despair. She allowed that to happen. And because of that, she allowed in what she needed. And when I first heard that story, I got tearful, I got goosebumps listening to her tell it. She talked about she was resisting what had happened to her, but you have to accept it, as hard as it might be. If you can accept something like that, and you can accept the difficulties in your life and accept what your life is right now at the stage you're in, no matter what might be lacking or what you feel is lacking, whatever you feel needs to be improved, if you can accept that, you can totally change your life, because then you're going to allow the good things to flow back in, and the inspiration and the answers. All of us, I don't know anyone who doesn't go around feeling like there's more to life than this. There's more answers out there. A lot of people actively seek answers, whether it's being a scientist and seeking answers that way, or being in some kind of spiritual or religious realm seeking answers that way. I think all of us are looking for answers. And they're there if we're just willing to quiet ourselves down and turn off the outward world, the outer world that's constantly blaring in our ears all the time, and go inside into our inner world. Those answers are there, but we can't force them. We can't force meditation to give us the answers. We have to relax and let it. Now, my second example is a personal one. Now, please know I've only gone a couple years in this journey. I'm still pretty new to all this stuff. I'm certainly not a guru or what I'd call an expert or anything like that. I'm certainly not completely enlightened or anything like that. But I do know miracles can happen, and I've seen them in my life. And I do feel like there's a lot of the spiritual realm that's invisible, but it can be felt. And several years ago, and this was years before I'd ever even heard of the law of attraction or any of the spiritual teachings I actively subscribe to now and am exploring, I had a friend who was going through a divorce. And we used to work in the same office. We used to be side by side, and that's how we became friends. But the company we worked for decided to have her run another office, and they promoted me to the manager of the one we'd been in. And she was going through divorce at this time. And she was having a really, really tough time. Everything seemed to be going against her at this time in her life. And in the middle of one of the work days, I remember a random thought of her came to my mind, just kind of randomly. I had this really strange, cold feeling all over that felt really bad, like scary bad. And I'd never felt it before, and I haven't felt it since either. But I knew something was very wrong, and I called her right then. And I discovered that she was in a very dark place, and she was considering some really dark things in her life and was contemplating whether life was even worth living. And I was able to talk to her for quite a while. I was able to make her feel better. I offered to come over there and be with her if she needed me. And by the time we got off the phone, I felt much better. That cold feeling had dissipated, and I felt confident she wouldn't do anything rash, and she didn't. But if I hadn't responded to that weird cold feeling that most people would probably just blow off and go, whatever, that's not real, I'm not sure that my friend would still be here. And I know that might sound crazy. It might sound like I was overreacting, like, maybe nothing would have happened. You don't know that, Maybe she would have been fine if I hadn't called her. But deep down, I really don't think so. I think she was going through so much pain and so much difficulty that I'm really not sure she wouldn't have done something that she would have regretted. So I think we're all connected. I think we're all connected to the divine, whether you call that higher purpose, that higher being, God, the universe, source, or whatever. And I also think we're all connected to each other because we're all here on the planet at the same time. We're all here, and I don't think that's an accident. I don't think that by hearing something and knowing it's the truth, I don't think that's an accident either. I think that's by design. We all have intuition, and we all have this knowing inside of us when we know when the truth is spoken, if we pay attention to it and if we allow ourselves to understand it. There's some things that you just know down to your bones, in your bones, you know it in your gut. And those are the kind of things that if we spend a little more time on and allow them to really allow our intuition to grow, we can really learn more and be guided in our life. I think a lot of us want guidance, and that is our guidance, and we tend to blow it off. We tend to say, oh, that's just crazy stuff, or that was just a weird feeling I had. No, that is divine purpose, talking to you. And maybe they're not actually talking to you in words like we would talk to each other, but I do believe that that is the guidance that we're all asking for. And then when we get it, a lot of us ignore it. So just be willing, just have a willingness to think maybe this is something other than what I thought it was. Maybe this is the guidance I'm looking for. And just because we don't fully comprehend something doesn't make it any less true. Maybe we're not in a place to understand everything, but understand whatever the little bit is that you do understand about this. Go with your gut, go with that feeling, and see where it leads you. This is my advice. Do what you will, of course, but I do think that we can really broaden our horizons and have a much happier and fulfilling life if we start to follow that intuition. And not to say that I haven't struggled myself with understanding this stuff. I can know something, and I know everybody's like this. You can understand something on an intellectual level and not actually believe it deep down. It's kind of like I can say, I'm a rich woman 1,000,000 times a day, but not believe it. And so those are two very different things. But if we can start accepting those feelings and that intuition, and we can start changing our actual beliefs, because that's the hard part, changing what we believe. So if we can do that, we can start realizing that that's God trying to show us the clarity that we're after, trying to give us the lesson that we've been trying to learn all along. And sometimes that can be painful. And sometimes we manifest these big, wonderful things, and sometimes we manifest these little tiny things and don't realize that that's what they are. Those little things are manifestations too. And sometimes we manifest stuff we don't want at all because we need the clarity. We need the lesson of that, even if we don't realize it. But if we can start looking at all that as something that's being shown to us, it's not trying to hurt us. It's just God trying to show us something so that we can, maybe there's pain there that we need to release. Maybe there's backed up feelings that we need to clear out. And I know it's uncomfortable. My goodness, I don't want to spend the whole day crying or whatever, but sometimes that's what's necessary, is for us to release whatever that is that's been holding us back. And if we can do that, I think we really can have the life that we want. And again, I'm still on the journey. I think I probably always will be, no matter how many years I do this. All the different podcasts and books and things that I've gotten into, everybody, no matter how long they've been doing this, they all say, oh, I'm still on the journey. And maybe they've accomplished phenomenal things. Maybe they have outwardly, maybe they have every single thing that anybody looking at them would want. They have the perfect love life. They have lots of money. They have a perfect fulfilling career. They have their health and all this kind of stuff. But we never know everything. I think there's always room for more, and maybe the more fulfilled we are, the more we can help others. And ultimately, I think that's really the goal, is to help each other while we're all here on this planet together. And that's just my take on it. But I think if we learn to trust God and go with the flow, then that is what true surrender is. That is what surrendering to the flow and to God and allowing Him into our life and allowing the universe to give us the messages that we're asking for and to answer the questions that we're asking. And I was first introduced to that idea of surrender by Kelly Cooper's fabulous podcast and her blog. And on the particular podcast I listened to, when I first heard her mention it, her husband Ryan Biddulph was also on there as her one and only guest. He's often on there as her one and only guest. So check out both Kelly's podcast and Ryan's blog, and check out Rika Zimmerman's site. And I hope you find more answers. I hope you come up with even more questions that help guide you on your way. And what do you think of all this? Tell me what you think. Put them in the comments and let me know what you think. And as always, I hope you have a fabulous and happy day.
I truly appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to this show. You can learn more about the topics discussed on this episode at my website, writinginyourjammies.com, and at my Amazon author page, keyword Jeannie Hall. Remember that you are worthy of all good things. You are pure love, light, and energy.